Hello there. These are welcome words from the new Chief Inspector of Constabulary, but do they amount to much? The newly appointed Chief Inspector of Constabulary, Andy Cooke, is telling police officers that they are not the thought police and must concentrate their efforts on real physical crimes. All welcome concepts, especially as crime charging rates are at a 30-year low and went down to 6% in 2021. With Andy Cooke, a former chief constable, saying that crime rates were at their worst in his 36-year career. But I bet social media was well policed though. Talking to the Times, Cooke said, "We're not the thought police. We follow legislation and we follow the law. Simple as that. Policing is busy enough dealing with the serious offences that are going on, busy enough trying to keep people safe." And he went on to say that policing should stay out of politics with a small p and away from different thoughts that people have. Well, we all know that it's not the thoughts that are the problem. It is the articulation of those thoughts that can cause the problems. And the whole point to those non-crime hate incidents was to identify those who articulate their thoughts by offensive language against others so that their thinking could be checked and they could be re-educated before they committed an actual hate crime. If you keep your thoughts to yourself, people can suspect, but they'll never know. Unless you're active on the web, of course, where you leave multiple signals purely from which sites you visit and which social media accounts you engage with. And it's what you say on there that can draw attention to you from various actors, from activists to law enforcement. But that's also where your thoughts can be stopped from entering the public arena by the real thought police, social and mainstream media. But when people are not allowed to articulate their concerns for fear of being labelled or worse, then resentment builds up and can end with tragedy. And when government policies are such things as unlimited inward migration, net zero carbon and enforced medical interference, the police can do whatever the legislation says it must do, and social media will go along with what government regulators require of them. We saw all of that in the pandemic. Or they'll follow whatever they think government policy is, because that is what the courts will be doing anyway. Just look at the different ways that various protests are policed and activists punished. Some can interfere with ordinary people going about their lawful business and engage in criminal damage with almost impunity. And some of their activities could amount to incitement, but that's never pursued. Forget the few sentences being handed out to some protesters, because some of those activists keep repeating their offences because the punishment is not severe enough. While another person innocently preaching from the Bible or quoting from Churchill gets arrested or moved on. And I don't see any of this ending any time soon. And I say that because the concept of "for the greater good" is seeping unnoticed and unstoppably into our society. For example, Bible quoters are usually targeted for removal in case they offend other beliefs, so moving them on has the result of preventing any violence from the offended. Think teacher of Batley. All for the greater good. Or is it? Is that just a short-term, easy way out? It's always easier to deal with the soft target today, but as I said, resentment builds up. And another facet of the greater good is the UK signing up to the World Health Organization pandemic policy changes, which would pass all control for pandemic responses, such as lockdowns and enforce medical procedures, etc., to the World Health Organization. This amendment via Provisional Agenda Item 16.2 will change the WHO International Health Regulations so that its Director General is empowered to declare an arbitrary health emergency in any nation. The WHO will be able to interfere in another nation's sovereign affairs on a whim. And the WHO legislative body, the World Health Authority, will be voting this through by the end of this month. And our Prime Minister Boris Johnson backs this sort of thing. He has backed this amendment. Here's what he wrote back in March 2021 in a joint article with other world leaders about future pandemics and a new international pandemic response treaty. The main goal of this treaty would be to foster an all-of-government and all-of-society approach, strengthening national, regional and global capacities and resilience to future pandemics. As well as, pandemic preparedness needs global leadership for a global health system fit for this millennium. All of society and global leadership and a global health system. Not choice and not national democracy then. Doesn't sound to me like this would give much scope for too much protest against what amounts to a globalist takeover. Pandemic responses will be ordered from a globalist organisation and will be imposed by diktat on the whole population of the target country, because that target country will be deemed a threat to global health and must be shut down immediately by external order for the greater good. Then it's masks, lockdowns and jabs all the way down. And this will also include the global distribution of medicines and medical equipment, while giving hostile international players the chance to use a biological agent to shut a whole country down. And the police will be enforcing it all, and will be ensuring people's different thoughts do not emerge into the public arena and morph into actions that could interfere with the government acting on the order of the WHO for the greater good. The same could go for net zero in future. Now, you may be seeing climate protesters crying foul today over the new Policing Act that interferes with their protests, and many people will be breathing a sigh of relief over that. But in future, when expensive heat pumps are being foisted by law on the people, and many are forced to give up their personal transport because they can't afford electric cars, or when they are forcibly locked down or worse, then our police will be empowered to crack down on any protests interpreted as anti-net zero carbon or anti-medical, and therefore be against the greater good. And the greater good will in future be the catch-all that will always override everything. The eco-clowns, for one, will be able to stay at home with their feet up, in the knowledge that the police are now doing their job for them. They might even join up to help out. But your personal thoughts, beliefs, religion and needs will become irrelevant, as will those of nation-states. So it's not the freedom of thought that we need. We already have that. It is a greater freedom to articulate those thoughts, as long as there is no incitement to violence. But right now, our ability to question what are claimed as the settled sciences of climate and pandemics is very highly stifled. And I can only see that getting tighter and the police becoming more involved in future, whatever anyone says. Because when the people come to realise that their freedoms, like that of travelling when and where they like in their own personal transport, or what medical procedures they undergo, or how much of their money is redistributed about the globe Marxist style, all for the greater good, not to mention the upcoming food shortages. While the elite, great and good, trough their way around the planet, governments are going to need all the law enforcement they can lay their hands on.